Hi there, welcome to Daily Sales Tips with Chin. We're talking about the guide framework which you can use to move a prospect all the way from interested lead to a close. Quick reminder, GUIDE stands for greet, understand, inform, discuss, and enrich. So today we're focusing on discuss. In specific, we'll be talking about how to overcome objections. So at this stage, you've greeted your customer, you've probed them, you understand their needs, and then you've gone in to pitch and present your solution. You're trying to get a close, you're trying to get them to buy, but they are actually saying no. So how do you reduce the likelihood of those no's? And how do you turn those no's into yeses? So let's dive right into it. First off, do know that no matter what you do, there will be certain cases where you've done everything correctly, but a customer still says no. That's A-okay. It does not mean that you are a bad sales rep. It doesn't mean that you've used the wrong techniques. Sometimes there are just certain hidden variables that you have to uncover and address before they're willing to say yes. So it's not your fault. Know that a no is not the end of the road. It often just means that you need to find another way. You need to take a detour, right? You need to understand what else hasn't been discussed, what else they're uncertain about. Before I share any tips, I want to quickly remind you that this is the one main phase in the entire sales process where a lot of sales reps tend to screw up. And this is where if you screw up here, you will ruin the relationship and you will come across as being too pushy. So persistence is very important in sales, but use your judgment wisely, especially over here. If a customer is saying a hard no, you need to realize it's a hard no. You need to also realize that if a customer is saying no, might there be certain things that they're uncertain about, right? So my rule of thumb here is generally I say, try to get at least 3 no's. So if they say no, don't back down right away. Don't back down if you get rejected, because sometimes if you know that your solution, if you know that your product or service will actually benefit your customer, if you don't at least try to address that first no, you're not doing the bare minimum to ensure that they get the required information to make an informed decision. So what do I mean by that? For example, they might not know that there are other competitors out there that are usually more expensive, and they say no because they want to research those competitors. So if you don't dig in and clarify that assumption, then your customer isn't standing to gain the best benefit coming out of the conversation, because then they go out, they actually spend more money with an alternative, right? So another thing to know is when I say get at least 3 no's, I'm not asking you to go in for the close in the same way 3 times. You want to try to approach it from different angles. So I'll give you some examples when we talk about good and bad examples later. The last thing I want to talk about before we jump into the tips is it's very important to plan for objections, because if someone gives you an objection and you just come up with an answer on the spot, answers on the spot are often not going to be very good answers. So you need to really understand what are some common objections, what are objections that will typically come up for each and every different customer, because I can't give you tips that will address each and every business and each and every solution. Every business solution and every customer is going to be different. So the key is really just to be prepared to know how to respond to all those possible different objections and address them. So let's jump into it. So topic number 1, how do you be persistent without being pushy? So first off, you have to understand your sales process. Sometimes you might be able to convert a customer within a single interaction, but oftentimes it's not going to be the case. Most interactions take typically at least 5 to 7 touch points to close a sale. So if you go in and you try to get a customer to buy and they say a no, it simply might be that they need more time to warm up to you, right? What some of these 5 to 7 touch points are is it's not that you have to ask for a sale 5 or 7 times. These touch points could be other touch points as well. It could be things that happen without you being around. It could be seeing an ad from a company. It could be visiting your website. It could be reading one of your blogs. It could be, a follow-up email that you send. So all of these could be different touch points. It's not just you trying to push them to a sale. If you're worried about being pushy, if you're a sales rep that really is concerned with that and gets uncomfortable with that, my number 1 recommendation here is stand for your customer. Really understand their needs. If you understand their needs and you focus more on helping them rather than your goal of closing a sale, you will never come across as being pushy, right? So focus on understanding, is your solution a fit for them? Don't push it. Number 3, stay in the driver's seat. Stick with them. So you need to lead the conversation over here. You need to lead the follow-up. Don't expect the customer to follow up on their own. And when you're following up, also follow up more than you think you might need to, right? You need to be there for your customers. It's not about pushing them to a sale. So I'll give you an example. Last year, 2020, COVID-19 came around. A lot of businesses really had a lot of financial related challenges. Good sales reps will be there and try to help their customer, even if their customer can't convert right away. So be there for your customer through their conflicts, and they will stay loyal to you as well. Sometimes, in certain cases, when it comes to a customer saying no, you have to also realize that customers say no because they personally have doubts or they are afraid of certain things, and this will hold them back from maximizing their own potential. So if you really know your customers' goals and objectives, you want to hold them accountable to what they say they want. If you do a good job with that, you're sticking by them, so you're representing them, then you will not come across as being pushy, right? It's because you care about them. It's not about you care about your sale. And what will help in doing that is be a truth teller. So what do I mean by being a truth teller? Number one, walk your customer through to the end of the journey, even if it is uncomfortable. Some reps feel uncomfortable going in for a sale or trying to address objections because they feel like, they're trying to get the money there. No, it's not about that. You need to be there for your customer. If your product or service is not a fit, be clear and don't be afraid to tell your customer, actually, you know what? Our solution is not for you. If you do that, it does not make you look bad. It does not make your solution look bad. Some reps feel the need to push for a yes because they've already spent all the time to convince the customer of how amazing their solution is. And they feel that if they actually tell the customer, you know what, it's not a fit, then they actually look bad. No, it actually doesn't work that way. If you actually if you're honest and you tell your customer that it's not a fit, it actually shows that you have integrity and you're not just pushing for a sale for the sake of profit. And this will actually reflect well because sometimes those customers will refer other people to you as well. But sometimes your solution might actually be a fit for your customer. And this is the case where you need to expose them to the truth of the situation if they are denying it, if they are avoiding it, right? What would the future look like, or what could the future look like if they don't adopt your solution? What opportunities are they missing out on? What penalties might they be facing? Just get them to really understand what they are missing out on. So I hope this will help you really be comfortable with addressing objections without being pushy. Oops. So first off, how do you deal with that follow-up? How do you lead that conversation? Tip number one, maintain power and control. You drive the sales process. You are the one who's in charge of it. Know that only 1/3 of customers will actually want to dictate next steps on their own. The rest, the other 2/3, actually expect you to lead. And when I say lead here, it's not about strong arming or forcing them into a sale, but it's mostly about just following up and nudging them to a decision. So you need to be able to control that, and you need to be comfortable to just actually follow up. Be a tour guide. So how do you do that? Book the next call. So for example, if you're in a conversation with a customer, instead of going back and forth through email after the call to try to set up the next call, save some time and just while they're on the call with you or they're in there in person with you, try to book the next call right away. Agree to a timeline early. You want to understand when they want to achieve certain things. Because if you can ask these timeline related questions early, then you can hold them accountable later on in the conversation. So I'll talk about how you can do that later. Guide the process. You want to, instead of asking them, how would you like to proceed? You want to be in control. You want to say, hey, if you expect to see these results by this date, we need to do this right now, right? So you need to guide that process instead of just saying, how would you like to move forward with this? Make sense? So it's just the attitude and the different shift in how you're actually positioning yourself and making the statements that really make a big difference around how you control the conversation. And again, my reminder here is it's not about forcing them into a sale. It's about just carrying and making them comfortable so that they're willing to say yes, because it's all about them. So some tips around B2B closing. So if you're selling business to business, some quick tips here. Number one, set clear next steps and get decision makers in the room together. So there's two pieces to this tip. Tip number one is often a lot of case, especially in B2B solutions, implementation is very complicated. So some people will say no because they're uncertain about the process, uncertain about what will happen next. So if you're clear on next steps, it will help reduce that risk, reduce that uncertainty, and they're more willing to say yes. Tip number two, when I say get decision makers in the room, oftentimes I see some companies or sales reps send proposals. Proposals are important, but send them after, send them later. Don't send them before. The reason why that's important is because if you have people in the room together, you can understand why they're saying no. You can ask a clarifying question. If you send a proposal and someone says no, it's really hard for you to ask why they're saying no. Make sense? So when you have them in a room together, you can do what we call a whiteboard session. And oftentimes you're actually getting them to brainstorm all the solutions, all the problems that they have and all the next steps. And then if they're still saying no, you can clarify, you can ask them, right? What are we missing? What wasn't covered in discussion? Hopefully you can discover cover all the points in the discussion. And if you do that, then you send a proposal after, not before the meeting. Because then if you send a proposal after the meeting, technically you would have already addressed everything and the proposal is just the formalities and they would just say yes right away. If you send a proposal before the meeting, they will have a lot of doubts and they might even say, you know what, we don't think it's for us, and they won't even take the meeting. Make sense? So one other tip I want to share around closing urgency that will help you with dealing with those no's is understanding what their motivation is. So number one, you have external urgency. External urgency are things like this, right? You might say, hey, promotion ends in 3 days. Since you're here today, why don't you get it before it's too late? This kind of things are what I call false scarcity. You have those limited time-based sales, early bird discounts, limited quantities available, that kind of stuff. It's all about driving action through an urgency that's based on the environment around them. What I find more powerful instead is internal urgency. Internal urgency, though, it requires you to really understand your customers' motivations and their timeline. So it's important because if you understand their timeline and their motivations, then you know what's driving them to take action. You know what their personal desires are. And when you can hone in on these elements, then it becomes a lot more natural. It's not about being a pushy salesperson by generating some sort of false sense of scarcity. Make sense? So how do you try to ask and determine or assess internal urgency or internal motivations? So here are some example questions. In the discovery phase, when you're trying to understand a customer, you might ask something like this. You might say, how much longer are you willing for it to be this way? Or you might say, how soon do you want to see X result? And if you've already asked this question, when you're going in for the close or you're dealing with an objection, you might say, hey, you wanted to see X by Y date. In order to achieve that, we need to start on this date, right? So you hold them accountable to their own motivations. And that is a lot stronger than actually just pushing, hey, limited time discount, you have to get it now. Make sense? So here are some examples that I promise. So let's say you're trying to sell an accessory for a car. So this is a bad example of how you could position. You might say, hey, so which accessory would you like? And then customer says no. Then you say, are you sure you don't want any? They say no. You say, what if I give you a discount? You can see over here, it seems a bit desperate, right? It seems like you're being pushy. The customer's already saying no, and then you're just giving them another question. Here's a better way of doing it. For example, you might say, hey, based on your lifestyle, here are some accessories that will go well with your car. Take some time to check them out while I set up your paperwork. And then you come back to them later, you say, hey, did you decide on which accessory you need? And then again, if they say no, you say, are you not getting them because you find them a bit too expensive? Perhaps I can help you save a little through a bundling discount. So what you'll notice on the right is you're approaching it from different angles. You're not just coming at the same question in the same way. And then number two, you're also positioning for your close in multiple places in your sales cycle, right? You're planting the seed early when you're setting up the paperwork, and then you come back to them later and you ask them, do you decide on which one you want? And then you might ask them later, while you're maybe helping them set up certain things, you might say, hey, you know what? Did you decide not to get them because it was too expensive? You know what? I could probably give you a discount. So try to come in at different angles and position in different points in time as well. So last tips I want to share are, if you know what a client's possible objections are, so if you know what the common objections for your prospects are, then one way that you can actually avoid those objections is to remove them early in the sales process. So what do I mean by that is, do your research, really understand your customers. If you know that, let's say, quality is a common objection, then if you're actually positioning yourself in the pitch when you're informing the customer, you might say, you know what, we have a lot of misconceptions about our quality. A lot of people think that because our price is low, that quality is low. That's not the case. Here's how we source our products, blah, 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 blah. Then you'll actually remove the objection before it even comes up, right? So if you do a good job this way, then it won't even become an objection. So that's one hidden trick. So try to do your research and understand what common objections are. Is it price? Is it decision maker? Is it this? Is it that? And address them early. Tip number 2 here is, this is the one place in the entire sales process where I tell reps where it's safe to make an assumption. So what do I mean by make an assumption? So if you say something like, are you not sure about it? Is it because you don't like the color, or is it too expensive? So you're actually making an assumption. You're doing a statement here. If it is not the case, the customer will correct you and they will gladly tell you actually what is their main concern. And it just basically helps you uncover the objection more quickly, right? So commonly you might hear a lot of people saying, you know what, I'll think about it. So that's a common objection. So how might you respond to that, right? So you can say, oh, is it because you don't like the color, or is it too expensive? Any assumption here will really just help you uncover what that objection is. They will tell you, oh, you know what? It's not just that I need to think about it. I just need to speak to my wife about it, right? And then you might say, oh, no problem. Feel free to jump on a call or take a picture of it and send it to him or her, right? So if you do something like that, it really helps you prepare so that you become a lot more natural in the sales process and you don't come across as just being desperate. So overcoming objections can also happen virtually, not just in person. You can do something like a guided walkthrough. So you can do a demo, get someone on a call, say, hey, you know what? Let me show you how our solution works. Maybe they're not buying because they are uncertain about how to use certain features, right? So you can do a guided walkthrough, or you can use email drip campaigns. So that works very well. You can see things like sometimes if you go to an e-commerce website, you add an item to a cart and you forget to check out, then there's a drip campaign that happens after that. So you might say, hey, oh, there are some items you left in your cart. And then you might send certain promotions or reviews about those products, things like that. So yeah, think about how you can use some of these things. Let me see if I have other examples. Other examples. So for example, if someone signs up for a trial account and they use it a lot, but they don't upgrade to a paid account. So email them, just ask them, hey, do you want to actually have us show you how you can set up our tool for your organization? So maybe they need a bit more help, right? Maybe it's a drip campaign for people who have visited your pricing page. Hey, check out this pricing comparison with other competitors. So think about different ways you can address those objections. So here's the last exercise I'll leave you with. Today's session was quite a long session. So just start to brainstorm what are some of your possible objections and think about ways that you can address them. And if you start doing that preparation, this is really the first step in doing a good job with addressing objections. So I hope you enjoyed the session. If you are liking some of these videos, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Just search my name, Chin Heng Chang. I'll post the link down below as well. If you have any questions, just feel free to shoot me an email or comment down below as well. I hope you enjoyed it.